Good morning, everyone. I'm Sharon Natoli. Welcome to Health on a Shelf. What a great name for a session. I'm an accredited dietitian and also the founding director of Food and Nutrition Australia, and I've spent the last 30 years working with businesses and organisations across the food sector, helping them to identify the health and nutritional aspects of their food and to communicate those attributes to their key stakeholders, to consumers, in a meaningful way and also in a compliant and accurate way. And last year, I wrote a book called Food for a Better Future, a new direction for the global business of food. So now I write and I speak about that. And I'm also passionate about the private sector and business leading change toward a better future. Now, last night when I got home from here and I went into my hotel and relaxed, trying to get some sleep beforehand, I went through the headlines from the news from yesterday. And I came across an article about a boy from the UK that was actually going blind because of his poor diet. Anyone else see that article? Yeah. So he's 15, and in the last year he decided to eat the foods that he liked, so the textural foods that he liked, which meant that he was eating fish and chips, white bread, Pringles, the occasional slice of ham. And over that last year, his doctor first started treating him for vitamin B12 deficiency for anemia. Then as he started to lose his hearing, he investigated further. And then finally, when the boy was reporting that he couldn't read properly, he couldn't recognise faces, and he couldn't watch TV, he started treating him for blindness. And this is not an isolated case. It reminds me also of another case of a 16-year-old boy from Perth in WA, here in Australia, from a couple of years ago. And it's not just children that we're worried about. This is also happening in adults. So the Heart Foundation predicted recently that most of the 2/3 of the population that have overweight and obesity probably also have some kind of nutritional deficiency. And what this reflects is this rising paradox of malnutrition, that we're seeing it occurring not just in people that are hungry, but also in the seemingly well-fed. And so what we need to do now is address this paradox, and we need to raise the profile of nutrition, because what's happening is that over recent times, nutrition has somewhat flown under the radar. And in the past, we've bred crops for yield and to get more efficiency, and really not considered nutritional value. Also, in the past, we've selected seeds for their ability to adapt and grow in different environmental conditions without considering nutritional attributes and the nutritional value of them. And we've also gone through a period where we've developed foods that are highly processed, convenient, and develop them for a profit without really considering nutritional value. And now, the situation that we're in, we need to stop and we need to pause. And we need to rise up to the challenge not only of producing more food from fewer resources, but better foods with more nutrients. And that's what this session is all about. So I'm excited that it's called Health on a Shelf, because some of the companies and the people behind us are producing foods that are going to make it easier for us to be able to, pick our health off a shelf. And so I'm really pleased to introduce our speakers this morning. We have Professor Gary Williamson from Monash University, who's the head of Department of Nutrition and Dietetics. We have Bridget Wolf, who's the head of innovation for Snackfutures from Mondelez International. Didi, the founder and CEO of Soulfresh. And also Kristina Ivanova, who's the founder and CEO of Milk 2.0. And they're going to show us how innovation can really help to change and develop the foods we eat to make it easier for us to eat our way to a better future. So over to you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I was asked to talk for 10 minutes, and it's quite difficult to talk about the scientific area of nutrition in such a short time. One thing that, if you're not in nutrition, one thing people don't realize is how complicated it is. You need to understand biochemistry, physiology, medicine. It's not an easy thing to do. So when you say, how can I improve my product to make it better nutritionally, it's not such a simple case. So I just want to tell you a few things about my work that we've been doing over the last few years. You might guess that I'm not from Melbourne. I came here less than a year ago to work at Monash University as head of department. So a lot of the work that I did was in Europe, and so a couple of examples there I'm going to show you. So I think I have this one. Yeah. So actually the food we eat is not just made up of one type of food, and we don't only eat one type of food. We eat mixtures. And although the ideal situation would be that we always ate raw and fresh food, of course this is not possible. We want to get as much as we can of the good stuff from these foods into the final product. So these are the sort of things that I'm interested in. I'm interested in polyphenols from fruits and vegetables, plant-based material. These are the things that give the fruit and vegetables some of the colour. A little bit to do with the sort of flavour and mouthfeel, but one of the most important things about them is that generally they're regarded as good for health. And as I said, nutrition's a complex area, so there's many thousands of papers on why they're good for health, but they generally accepted to be good for health. And if you have a healthy diet, which might, let's say, consist of 5 portions of fruit and veg a day, and some coffee and tea, then you're consuming hundreds of milligrams of some of these compounds in the diet, which is obviously a lot less than the fat and carbohydrates, so they're sort of fairly minor components, but they're a very important part of the diet. So one of the things that's important is trying to take as much as possible of these good components from the original food, such as an apple, shown here, into the final product. So one of the things about processing of apples is that the more you process, the more of the good stuff you lose. So you can end up, at the end of the day, with a product which contains almost none of the original good stuff from the original apple. So you end up, if super ultra processed apple juice in the worst situation is basically sugar water. So that's not what we want to do. What we want to do is get as much of the original stuff from the apple into the product. So it's not always easy to tell what the product is from what it says on the label. So what do you think about this one? It's got mostly water, seemingly lots of sugar, citral, benzaldehyde, all these sorts of things. Is it good or bad? Well, actually, it's blueberries. So you really can't tell from the label whether something is really good or not. And in fact, even from this description, some of the natural components, the polyphenols, the antioxidants in the fruit, are actually labeled with E numbers. So it's really difficult to know what you're getting from the label. So I just want to give you an example. Many years ago, I worked at Nestle in Switzerland, and we developed a coffee. So coffee, it's had some bad press in the past. A lot of the studies that were done, the epidemiological studies done on coffee, failed to take into account that in the 70s and 80s, many people who drank coffee also smoked. So once you take those studies out of the picture, then what you find is that actually consumption of coffee is pretty convincingly linked to a reduction in the risk of type 2 diabetes. So without going into the sort of scientific aspects of it, I mean, it's a pretty good link in terms of epidemiology. So Nestle wanted not only to give coffee a little bit of a better press, but they also wanted to make a even more healthy coffee. So I was involved in some of the work at the very beginning, and which was setting up a whole load of different systems and assays so that we could actually measure the compounds from the coffee which went into the bloodstream of people. And so we looked at that. We did a whole load of chemical synthesis, a whole load of biochemical analysis, and we found that, in fact, we could measure all these things in blood, and we could actually find out what was there. So the next step was then to take to take some minimally processed coffee beans, some green coffee beans, and add those to the unroasted coffee beans. So it's a very complex sort of analysis and nutritional analysis with a fairly simple solution to the final product. And what we ended up with was Nestle Green Blend. So this is work that I did when I was both in Nestle and then at University of Leeds in the UK. And it led to the launch of this product, which is, it's sold in many countries in the world, just happened at the time, before I really knew where Australia was, that it was firstly launched in Australia, and it did well, and it's actually still available on the supermarket shelves, and I guess it's made Nestle a few $1 billion over the years. So it's very important that, although it says on the label that it's naturally rich in health-supporting antioxidants, which seems a very simple message, the science behind that is really quite complicated. Now, you can't just assume that if you take something that's good and you put it into a capsule, that it's going to remain effective. So this is some work that we did on pomegranate. So pomegranate juice contains an antioxidant in it called punicalagin, which is actually good at blunting those glucose, those blood sugar spikes after you've eaten. However, that happens if you have a juice, but if you take the pomegranate and you make an extract from it and you give that, then you actually find that the extract does not have the same effect. So you can't just take the stuff from something that's good, like a fruit, make a powder, put it in a capsule, and assume it's going to have the same effect. It's really important to test out the hypothesis that the health benefits can remain. So we have in my department in Monash, we have a lot of industry partners who we work with. The industry partners can take students from our courses, and so therefore we get a lot of interaction through students. But also I'd like to sort of advertise the fact that we can look at the health benefits from particular different foods. We can do human studies, we do mechanistic studies, and I think this is really important when you're considering making products which you're claiming in one way or another healthy. It's actually important to know that they really, really are. And one of the first steps is that the students that we generate from our courses can really help in that. So if you're interested in any student placement opportunities, then you can see me later. We also have information on websites. We have an online course that people can do, which is shown here, and we have like hundreds of thousands of people doing these courses, and it's really good for finding out about the complexities of nutrition and the fact that you can't just say something is an antioxidant or something is this and then automatically assume that there is a health benefit. There's a lot more science behind the claims that you're making. So I'd like to just finally say that there's a number of take-home messages. So it's essential to have a science-driven approach to look and claim for the healthiness of food. So if you're doing some food processing and you're claiming healthiness at the end, it's really important to know that all the good stuff is retained in the final product. So you need to do that. It's possible maybe to even improve on the initial product. So, maybe we can improve on the apple at the end of the day, but that's not really the first goal. So we need to understand some of the mechanisms. We need a detailed knowledge. That's what we have, which is why we're here. So, we're willing to work with people. And so optimizing the phenolic antioxidants in fruits and vegetables, for example, would be one way to go. But this must be tested and cannot be assumed. So I'd like to thank the organisers for inviting me, and I'd like to thank you for being here and for paying attention. So thank you.
See if that works. That work?
There we go. Oops.
It's a delicate balance to be healthy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Bridget Wolf. I head up Mondelez International Snackfutures Innovation Hub, and we are an independent innovation and venture hub that we were created almost to bring to life what we're talking about today, which is disrupting the big food, disrupting ourselves in process. And when you think of process, sometimes it's just anything cooked. You know, the second that you clean it, you've done something to it, and you've heated it, and you've done something to it. So how do we create an industry now that gives more snacking choices and kind of can unlock what's going on in the world of consumers and health right now? It is very humbling being up here and seeing all the incredible innovation and thought leadership that's going on in the space, not just for people health, but on the planet. And how do we do both? Because as we're learning, there's definitely a symbiotic relationship of what Mother Earth can give us in terms of food as medicine and in nutrition, and then also how we pay it forward. And I think as we often think about consumers, it's really a lot more of a holistic, what it means to be healthy nowadays from a consumer language is a lot more than just saying I've gone to the doctor and my checkup is okay or I am disease-free. We look at our lives in a much more holistic way. That this morning, the first thing we did was we went to the Botanic Gardens to get some fresh air because we knew we'd be inside all day, and then we have a long flight tomorrow. Or you have a moment of fruit or whatever your protein is, and you want to distress with going to the gym. So you figure out ways to manage your life, or you have a connection with a friend to give yourself some emotional fuel and have it that way. And so that's really what we're trying to do at Snackfutures, which is to bring that consumer centricity to the forefront of everything. So a little bit about myself, because when we talk about consumers, we need to remind ourselves that we actually are humans, that consumers are people, and that we are one of them. So I am a mother of 2 daughters. I'm a lefty and a Gemini, which may say many things about me. I love my sweets and I love my gum, but I also love fitness, and I'm very mindful of what I've put into my bodies and my families. And I would say a word that has become quite personal in our journey and why I'm so excited to be part of Snackfutures was I started hearing the word nutrient dense, and that has become a whole new language of foods that I started to say, well, what is nutrient dense and what does that mean and where do I get it and how worthy are the snacks that we're doing, the choices that we can put out there. With that means Mondelez is a $26 billion company, and so we have our size and our scale, not only the opportunity and the ability, but the responsibility to put out there a lot of choices for consumers to match all of their well-being needs. We serve consumers in over 150 countries, and it is everything you may say, I don't know who Mondelez is, but you know who Oreo is, and the Natural Confectionery Company, and who Cadbury is. And these are the brands that we love, and we build, and we want to continue building those for the well-being of people and planet, but we also want to go into other choices, which speaks to a little bit of what snacking is and how we eat nowadays. It's a $1.3 trillion behavior. How many of us get to sit down and have 3 meals a day, every day, with a fork and a knife and a napkin? I will tell you, I started with a coffee and yogurt. I then in the car had something. I have nuts in my bag. To be able to have a traditional meal with everyone has gone by the wayside of just how we live our lives. We have our phone in one hand and our snacks in the other, and then we have everything going on around us. So that behavior is a huge opportunity for both us as a company, but as people of how we live our lives. And I often say if I could take a wand and snackify every moment and every need, whether it's for joy, for celebration, for connectivity, for my well-being, whether it's for stress or for sleep or for my guts, wherever it comes from, is how we can bring that through food. And food is such a powerful delivery for us. Mondelez this year announced our formal purpose, the Snacking Made Right, which is something we're quite proud of because it really means about giving consumers the right snack at the right time. I mentioned well-being is much bigger than just having the right protein or calorie or fat or sugar content. It's how it delivers sensorially. It's how it emotionally satisfies and fits that moment. And depending on where you are in the day and who you're with, you're going to want a different snack for that moment. And for us, it's really being able to deliver that right snack for that right moment and that consumer need. And we talk about at Snackfutures that our mission is basically Mondelez on steroids. Everything we do from consumer centricity, we are almost the startup team of the company that's creating new brands and businesses, and we also partner with startups and we'll invest in them, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But we too has a team of ethos of good for people, kind to the planet, deliciously fun. So I'm going to play a short video to give you a little bit of color of what we're about. Scared to touch it twice.
That's impossible. Imagine what the world would look like if we actually believed that. We'd have none of this, none of this, and definitely none of this. You know who decides what is possible? We do. The dreamers, the rule breakers, the risk takers. Those of us that don't see the world as it is, but as it could be. Today, we have the opportunity to do more, do it faster, and do it better. At Mondelez International, this excites us. We are on a mission to lead the future of snacking. That's why we created Snackfutures, an innovation and venture hub designed to feed consumers' appetite for what's next. By inventing new snacks, reinventing favorites, and investing in up-and-coming innovators. Our insatiable curiosity and hunger to disrupt has us exploring the earth to uncover trends, form human connections, and unlock new inspirations. Snackfutures will push the boundaries of what's possible and create a snacking world that is good for people, kind to the planet, deliciously fun. Snackfutures.
You often talk to startups and you meet their founders and they have the most inspiring stories. And big food will always be like, we don't have a founder story. This is ours. And so it's really a way as a big company to infuse on a very personal level to remind ourselves that this is who we serve. And what does that mean for well-being? Well, we actually have looked at 5 areas of what we talk about in well-being. So I want to know who yesterday had their 5 vegetables and fruits. Not bad. That's impressive. I didn't. That is a constant struggle to get in our lives the amount of produce and the fruits and vegetables and the nutrients that we need in the right way. So it's an area that we're actually looking to bring snacks that retain their nutrient quality in a way that's natural and authentic to the produce itself. When you talk about what's going on in the planet, you have to go and see what's happening across basically the whole ecosystem in agriculture, and how do we make sure that the strawberries that our grandparents tasted aren't quite the same as today, and what's going on, and how do we preserve what's going on in the soil and pay back to the land the food that we're eating today. Heroic kids, it is hard to pack a school lunch or a dinner that your kids like, that you're proud of and happy with, that the schools and the government are accepting now. And that debate of what's good or good enough to go in there is a daily struggle that we're trying to solve. And then we get into gut health, which we'll talk in a moment about, but we actually had our first investment in an Australian founder, Carol Landau at Uplift Foods, as part of our venture arm. But the whole concept that this gut what I call our bugs, our little bugs that we can say goodnight to and thank them, but they are basically regulating and changing our entire system of how we are in our health regulatory as well as our mental health. And then lastly, functional. And this is, as I was saying, we could snackify anything. How do we go from one to the other? So I'm going to go fast because we basically make this happen in about 4 ways. One, as I mentioned, is putting the invent, which is creating the brands together with the venture. So we have that under one roof where we can see what startups and ecosystem we can do. It's about knowing that we don't know all the answers and partnering with folks like you in the room and finding the specialists, the nutritionists, the processors, the innovators to help us be forward-thinking and develop snacks. It's being hyper-engaged and going with consumers to really understand their needs, and a very tribal approach. I think one of the big things that we are shifting is going from mass consumers and general pop to very specific tribal needs, and understanding that we're serving the ones, and then those will reach the others. We're hyper-approaching to startups and bringing it in on a very personal level. We talk about one thing that we distinguish ourselves with Snackfuture is to create a bespoke model for entrepreneurs where we see we have the strongest need and where we can help them the most grow and figure out how those two puzzle pieces fit together. And with that, I'm going to just jump because we're running out of time, but to say that put it in action are actually two brands that you'll be seeing. One is Dirt Kitchen Snacks, the other is Kapow. And as I mentioned, our Australian investment in Hue, which is a paleo brand, and then Uplift, our Australian gut health. So thank you. I hope it's a little inspiring to see that big food's changing as well, and welcome to the future.
G'day guys. So I'm Didi. I'm the founder of Soulfresh. Soulfresh is, for all intents and purposes, a healthier food and beverage company, and so it's a bit ironic because I'm actually losing my voice today, so you'll have to bear with me. But Soulfresh started 17 years ago in a little place called Byron Bay. So I'd been up there, I was a breakfast chef, I was managing a nightclub up there, having a great time. Got to know a lot of the local producers, and you know, I suppose being a foodie and having a food background, I've always really had a pretty simple view about how food should be. And in a place like Byron Bay, which I suppose is like Santa Cruz in America, is like food is simple, right? You know, people are producing really great food, they're living a really great life. And so when I left Byron and I moved to Melbourne, I was really struck by how much crap there was actually on the shelves. And you know, it's one of those things, and you go from living quite a simple life where everyone's quite friendly and you're in a little community, you come to a bigger city and people don't really talk, they're not really interacting, and the food that's available is just not great. And so it was probably about 6 months after I moved to Melbourne that I started Soulfresh, and was all about trying to just provide that simple, authentic food for people to buy and to eat. And so, you know, it was a dream that started 17 years ago. We've been on a real journey, and I think one of the things that hasn't changed over that time is this idea of trying to do good shit, you know, and it's like, it's something that we really instill inside everyone in the business, and I'm really proud. We've got heaps of the guys from nutritionists and innovators from Soulfresh here, and it's like one of these things where, you know, so often the solution is actually a very simple one, but what's actually very difficult about getting to that solution is about doing it in a way that actually appeals to a mainstream consumer. So we've had this view, you know, we want to change the way people eat and drink for better. And 17 years ago, what was defined as healthy is very different to what was defined as healthy today. And it's been a really amazing sort of journey on that change. We operate in three core categories, and so as we've evolved over the years, we've really sort of focused in on areas and categories that we think are in need of the biggest disruption to provide these solutions that we think are genuine solutions to this changing consumer behaviour. So we're in living beverages, which encapsulates things like apple cider vinegar drinks and kombucha. Really proud to say we're either the number 1 or number 2 brand across Australia, New Zealand and the UK. We're exporting to about 15 countries, where we're opening up in another 2 in the next couple of months, and we're really proud about what we've done. We're sort of moving that into the alcoholic space, given our expertise in fermentation. Then in plant-based drinks, we have a brand called Nutty Bruce, which is, you know, I think completely different to almost all the other plant milks out there, probably very similar to Milk 2.0, but really holistic. We only use whole organic almonds, we activate them, we use no gums, we use no thickeners. And I think it's just a great example, because Nutty Bruce is right now just about to be the number 1 almond milk brand in the fridge in Australia. And I think that's really testament to the fact that if you can create a great product and you can make it accessible for people, people will really buy into it. And then plant-based foods. And so, you know, we started selling vegetarian and plant-based foods about 15 years ago. And, you know, we used to walk into an IGA, a little independent grocer, out in the country, and they'd basically kick you out of the store because, you know, we're like, you know, what is this shit? You know, like, how am I going to sell it? And so a lot of what we've done over the last 15 years is really try to work with these retailers to help them communicate to consumers, to give consumers an offer and a choice in plant-based eating. So again, a lot has changed, and you know, we find it really fascinating, and I think it's a really exciting time. And obviously you can go out to Sunfed Meats out there, and there's a lot going on, and I think really we're just sort of at the tip of the iceberg. So So when you talk about the categories we're trying to disrupt, they really are soft drinks market, the global drinking milk market, and the global meat market. So within Australia, those three categories make up 15% of all of the food that's sold within grocery. So it's massive. And so if you consider just how much of that then makes up our diets, you really realise that, you know, when you look at the issues around soft drink consumption and sugar intake, when you look at the issues around environmental impacts of dairy farming and issues around animal cruelty, when you look at the plant-based foods and the same environmental aspects, you're looking at 10 billion people. We know we cannot live in the way that we've been living, so we have to change. And so we've looked at that for a while, and we're really excited by that because we really actually feel like, given our simplistic view of how we view food, how we view the world, we feel like we can really make a difference in those three categories. So the consumer, and we find it really interesting. We often talk about this low-house consumer. Most people don't know what we're talking about. So it's a consumer who's defined as a consumer who lives a lifestyle of health and sustainability. So what does that mean, Because it's like, what is healthy to a person in Australia can be actually very different to healthy for someone in a country like South Africa, where 48% of the people don't even have a fridge, where sugar forms a baseline energy need for a lot of the population. And so, but what's quite interesting is when you look at across the world, you see that there's this same desire to consume in a healthier way. And so down the bottom in the blue is what they call these low-house consumers. So these are the ones who are actively looking to essentially purchase products and live a lifestyle based on the value set that they hold and the worldview that they're looking out. And so 10 years ago, 15 years ago, those products weren't really on offer. I mean, this sort of decentralisation, this move away from scale being the solution to market share, this move towards customisation has really created this change. It's allowed smaller businesses and smaller brands to break through into the market and provide these solutions, these genuine solutions for better consumption. And so we feel like we're at just the tip of the iceberg. If you take a country like Sweden, 67% of females between the ages of 18 and 35 actively identify themselves as low-house consumers. And so, we look a lot globally at the behaviour of different regions for insights that we can then take into our products and into the behaviour of local markets. And so what does it look like? As we're eating and as we're evolving, healthy food seems to be everywhere, which is great. And, when we think about healthy food, we sort of think about it like in this Venn diagram. And so you've got these four major trends, being clean label, plant-based, free from, and ancient wisdom. And so as you're seeing these markets develop, you're seeing this further customisation inside products come about. And so when we're looking at these markets, when we're looking at the consumer, when we're trying to understand how people should actually be consuming, we sort of refer to things like this to try to understand how the different trends are coming together and how they might actually be applied inside products or inside categories. And so obviously it comes out in a lot of different ways. And so you've got organic, you've got fair trade, meat reduction, sugar reduction, gut health, reduced dairy intake. All of these factors are symptoms of the world in which we're living in and are symptoms of this change in this consumer behaviour. And so we're really excited by this because obviously as things go, there are sort of greater and greater opportunities for customised nutrition for people, which we think is really exciting. And so I'd just like to take you onto this slide now and you sort of wonder what it is. And so, I touched on the fact that we sell a bit of kombucha and living drinks. So this is the science of fermentation. And so when we sort of looked at kombucha, we thought, wow, this is really wonderful. You can, through fermentation, create this incredible product. It can taste really great. It can be very authentic. But how do you actually do it and break through a lot of the barriers that actually you change it from being a $7 a bottle product to a $2 a bottle product? And so we've really looked a lot at the science of fermentation. And so what this is essentially the chemical pathways in the fermentation of kombucha. How we think it applies is not just in kombucha. We actually think it has very broad applications because if you think about it, down the bottom here is what the industry first launched. And so you've got these traditional sort of soft drinks, you've got these energy drinks, you've got these infused waters, you've got these sort of flavoured mineral waters. And then what happened with the pushback, they sort of launched the low sugar variant, which is, seemingly good, except that It's filled with aspartame and artificial sweeteners. In fact, it's probably worse for you than the sugar-laden products. And so we look at the future and we say, hang on, you can actually use fermentation to legitimately get rid of the sugar, create a product that is living and vibrant, and it's actually good for you, but it delivers to what a consumer is looking for in each one of those categories. And so if you have a look at how that sort of changed, you know, Coca-Cola, 10.6 grams of sugar. Phoenix Cola, that's a product we launched 17 years ago. It was the healthier version back then. It has 10.2 grams of sugar, but it's certified organic. And that was legitimately healthier, you know. And now you have a look at, say, our Low-Rose Living Cola. It's got 100 million to 500 million active probiotics inside the product. We know naturally occurring the behaviour of the bacteria in there. It's got 1.1 grams of sugar. And the reason why we have a bit of sugar in there is because it's all about keeping a bit of food for the bacteria to live on. You know, there's a lot of sort of marketing out there, this idea that zero sugar kombucha is good, and really it's just a bit of a fallacy. And so we're all about trying to be authentic. And so we're really excited because these types of products deliver the cola hit that people are looking for, but do it in a way that is very authentic, that is very right, you know, and so it's actually good for the body. Alcoholic kombucha launching now, and we see sort of this equally exciting opportunity. And so what's next? You know, we think it's really exciting. We obviously further customization occurring. We think it's a really exciting time because I think brands like Soulfresh and everything we're doing, even guys like Mondelez and everything you're doing, I mean, we can be the opposite ends of the spectrum, but the opportunity is the same. And I think the most important thing is to remain authentic and always try to do good shit. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Kristina. I'm the founder of Milk 2.0, and I'm extremely humbled and delighted to be invited and to share my experience and ideas with all of you. So thank you so much, Global Table and Seeds&Chips, for having me here. So today, I would love to share my thoughts on how modern consumers' needs and demands are shaping up the roadmap for the future of foods. So here is my own story. This is me, 10 years ago in Russia. A busy, introverted teen, indulged in music and becoming a linguist. After uni, I would mostly eat what my parents would cook at home, traditional Russian food, extremely heavy on simple carbohydrates. But slowly I started to realize that my requirements and lifestyle are very different from my parents. And on top, I started to gain weight, which made the matter even worse. So I began learning more about foods and asking myself if these foods are right for me. After doing some research, I started implementing what I learned, and I went plant-based, followed by 1 year of strictly raw vegan diet. These changes in my diet helped me lose weight. I was very happy, yet I had so many unanswered questions. How could we all eat the same way when we are all so different? We all have different physiological needs. We all have different genetic makeup with different requirements. We all have different sociological upbringings, and on top, we all see our world in a different way with different aspirations for our future. So I kept asking. My answer that I did not know at that time wasn't just plant-based or raw vegan diet. It was much more than that. I wanted to create a lifestyle for myself that would be multidimensional and could evolve with me. So I couldn't find my answer until I moved to New Zealand 4 years ago. And after trying so many products, I realized that I was always somehow stuck between these 4 keywords. I wanted my food to be really nutritious, to meet my daily requirements of macros and micros, especially when I started training for boxing. I wanted it to be plant-based and environmentally friendly. And I wanted it to taste much better than anything else out there. So after struggling to find what I was looking for years, I decided to start experimenting myself with the foods that I knew could fulfill my needs. And after 1 full year of experimentations, I stumbled upon a perfect formulation, which I was really happy with because it was 100% natural, plant-based, really high in protein, and contained 16 vitamins and minerals. And it tasted really, really good. This is our first batch, and we decided to call it Milk 2.0, evolving milk to be food. After a couple more tests and trials, I decided to quit my full-time job and started Milk 2.0 Limited. Very ambitious, to say the least. Now me saying to myself last year. After the launch, we decided to start selling the products at the farmers market. And the feedback that we were getting from the consumers was really good. But it felt that people had many more questions than I had for myself. They wanted to know, where do I get my ingredients from? Are we organic? What is our production method? Who is making it? Where are we making it? Is it good for their health? Is it good for their health requirements? And so many more. And for the second time in my life, I felt that one-fits-all solution isn't the right answer for today's consumers. It became clear that the struggle that I went through wasn't just mine. More and more people have stopped trusting food brands and have become more skeptical about food labels and claimings. Having gone through this experience for a couple of months, having seen that our customers are actually bringing back the bottles and requesting for no labeling, earlier this year we decided to launch New Zealand's first plant-based milk subscription service, where we deliver our fresh milks to our customers in reusable packaging. And our customers tell us what milks they would love us to make based on their needs and wants. Fast forward 3 months, we were invited to TED 2019 in Vancouver to showcase our products and had extremely humbling experience. This is us right at the center, standing next to the North American food giants like Beyond Meat, Miyoko's Creamery, and Chobani, the small startup that started just 6 months ago out of passion. Our story has just begun, but I believe we are at the precipice of something much bigger, where different scientific and fundamental things are starting to merge. Our thirst for knowledge, conscious consumer, and prevalence of technology are pushing food system to evolve. It's been a very long time when that food system has been taking advantage of a time-poor consumer. Instead of changing and educating, it has been maintaining a status quo, which is no longer acceptable by today's consumers. Thank you so much for attention.
Thank you to all our speakers for a really informative session and a great balance from, I guess, science and innovation and growth of a business from startup to more innovation. So we do have, well, actually, I've got to check in with Rob if we have time for questions. No problem. Cool. Okay. So do we have any questions from the audience? And someone will come to you with a microphone. Yes.
A question for Bridget. I'm based in the US, and I'm just so curious with Mondelez, and you're seeing, I think, a consumer-driven shift. We all are in terms of healthy snacking requests. And I'm just wondering about some of the responses of the bigger brands you work with, and if you're seeing some pushback. Obviously, there are some entrenched lobby groups in the US that would have maybe some concerns about this emerging area. So I'm just curious about your comments.
Honestly, do I need to turn it on, or it is on?
Just
Right, so we'll see.
Yeah.
Honestly, so one, within Mondelez International, I would say it's a bit of a movement that we've started. We see nothing but complete almost hand-raising across the board in every function, from tax to insights to procurement, where people want to be part of this because they see this as part of their lives and world's changing. And it's a bit of a halo of inspiration of what can you do on the existing big brands and how do we evolve those portfolios and have more choices in those big brands. So I would say from that perspective, if anything, it's absolute support, and they're trying to learn from us of what we're seeing on the ground with consumers and what we see with startups, and it gives them more aperture of how they might explore what you can do with what they have. So that's been terrific. I would say when we reach out to the startup community, also it's been really positive of how do we bring to life whether their new ingredients are coming or their new technologies, the scientists that we've met, and to learn from them. And I think ultimately with the big NGOs and with consumers, there's a level of just transparency that we're going to have to maintain as to how we're learning and testing. And we in Snackfutures are doing a lot of different types of learning. We are learning often by doing and selling, which means we go out there like anyone else in a farmer's market and try to understand, what do you like? Would you buy this? Can you give us your feedback before fully doing a big launch? And I think sharing that journey and trying to just be as open as we can and receptive to the feedback and fix what's not working, continue what is going to maintain changing that paradigm of trust of big industry and big food and demonstrating what we can do is really good.
Thank you. Other questions? We got one here and then one up the back. Thanks.
Thank you. Alana, this is a question for Didi. With some of your products that you've brought to the market that were quite revolutionary, and you spoke about the retailers kind of telling you to get out of the store initially, how have you kind of got them to buy in and keep the faith along the journey as they've grown bigger?
Yeah, thank you. So I think that's a really interesting question. So I think in Australia we're quite different to a lot of the other countries in the world in that we have, until quite recently, haven't really had demographic-based retailing. And so what you've had is you've had Coles and Woolies, which have had sort of up to 80% market share. And then the only other channel you really have outside that is like your health channel or your independent channel. And so we love all the partners we work with, but we are especially passionate about trying to support these independents. Because really what we sort of realised is that these independents are the lifeblood of innovation in this country. I mean, if you are a little producer producing a product, you need an independent who's happy to buy you in 1 store or 2 stores or 3 stores and really support you. And that really is so much the foundation of a lot of small brands. And so what we've done over the years is really tried to build a very trusting relationship. And so what that meant is that we often get it wrong. We have a motto in Soulfresh, which is, try things, just get it wrong 49% of the time, and try not to make the same mistake twice. And what we've been able to do is when we make mistakes, which you inevitably do, we just ensure that we actually support that retailer. And so that can be helping that retailer actually sell through that product, taking that product back in some cases, really helping them a lot to actually communicate and sell that product. And so what we've found is that 15 years ago, it was actually almost about creating like a store within a store concept because consumers weren't necessarily looking for these products. So you had to create a beacon inside the store to give them a place that they could navigate to if they wanted to find those products. And then obviously as health gets more integrated, those products then sort of make their way into the mainstream aisles. And so we're quite a different company in that, a lot of companies will just try to sell as much of a product as they can. We are absolute that we only want to sell a retailer as much product as they can sell through. And our success isn't how much we sell into them, it's how we help them to sell through those products. And so that's something, and I can genuinely say we have great relationships, we have great trust. And so it's that way. And because, I tell you, coconut water did not work at the start and it gathered dust. And vegetarian food did not work at the start, and it gathered dust or it went out of date. And so, when you're committed to this, you're constantly trying to find ways to help make these sorts of products work. The other thing I would say is that the Australian grocery market has taught us that almost anyone can make, not anyone, but it's easier to make the healthiest, most expensive product because you can just use the best ingredients, you can combine them in a simple way. but unfortunately it's not affordable for most people. Most of us are living on a tight food budget. It's $200 a week or $300 a week. And so we've really realised that, being healthier is about giving a mainstream consumer who's living on a budget a healthier option for consumption. And so we focus a lot around the concept of value. We don't have to be the cheapest, but when someone puts our product next to someone else's product, the value proposition has to justify the purchase. And so we think a lot in that way about trying to deliver to this consumer. We made a lot of mistakes, but we're starting to get it more and more right.
Sharon, we've got one more question up the back here.
Thanks, everyone. Just a question for Didi. I'm a big fan of your kefir, and I love the different branding of the different products that Soulfresh put out there. I was just wondering, what's your thinking around developing a new brand and launching a new product? Like, how do you know how it's going to work? And if you could just elaborate a bit on your thinking about that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we thought about it a lot at the start. It's obviously easier, it's cheaper if you create a single brand that goes over everything. What we realised, though, is that, we could see the market starting to split up and segment, and, consumers have different priority sets within different categories. So we made the decision to go for a house of brands versus a branded house. And, when we think about the brand and what we're doing, some of it has just been by chance, to tell you the truth, and some of it has been because we've really thought about what that brand needs to communicate. And so we sort of draw up, I suppose, the boundaries of where each brand would operate and how they would sort of interact.
We have one final question, it's okay, on the app. It's to Gary. So how would you comment on the nutritional substitution of personalised food? How would you comment on the nutritional substitution of personalised food?
That's a very complicated...
That's not my question. That's something... That's okay.
It's a very complicated question, because, first of all, you have to define what personalised food is. Ultimately, each of us have different dietary requirements, depending on a number of different things, but there's only a limited number of foods available. So it's very difficult to have the number of different foods for the number of different people. So everyone's making a choice all the time. And so hopefully what happens is that people make their choice based on their best outcome for health. But of course that doesn't really happen. So what we do actually need is lots of products that are healthy, that people really like to eat, and then they can make those informed choices. So I think it's so-called personalised nutrition is like happening all the time, but in the sort of scientific sense, then it's still sort of quite a long way away from that. But at the moment, all the advice is really the same for everyone, is just eat more healthily. And actually everyone pretty much knows what that means in a general term, but not necessarily in a specific term for themselves. So I think it's a lot of it's down to knowledge, a lot of it's down to product availability, and a lot of it's down to knowing yourself. Whether that actually has to be knowing your own sequence of DNA, which is where the sort of the ultimate personalised nutrition comes from. I'm not convinced about that yet, but certainly knowing your health and knowing some of your simpler one, for example, cholesterol levels. People know that, then they can tailor their diet towards that. Doing it on the base of DNA, we're certainly not there yet.
Okay, Sharon, a couple of words? Do you want to? Over to you. Do
Yes.
you want to close?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance at the session. Thanks for your questions, and thanks to the speakers for a great session. Enjoy your lunch.
Give it up to Sharon and the panel, please. Thank you so much.